Yo, what's going on, guys? I'm Ryan Mackin. I'm here with Jason Freiert. Welcome to the very first ever CTW podcast. Excited to be here, Jason. What's going on, buddy?
What's up, man? I'm excited to get this started. I think we got a lot of good guests planned and just talk some wrestling.
Sure. It's certainly a project that's a work in progress. Both of us pretty new at this, especially me. Luckily, you're a lot smarter than I am. But I think that one of the key things to it is that we're just a couple of wrestling fans. We've been involved in the sport for a long time. We're making a podcast for the wrestling fans. So super excited to talk to a couple of people from the Maryland wrestling community, and just bear with us as we're learning, and any kind of feedback that you might have is totally welcome.
Yeah, so far so good. We've gotten great feedback and people seem to be excited about it. So hopefully we don't disappoint, and we'll just keep getting better. And as long as people are interested in it, we'll keep doing it.
Sweet. Well, before we get started, this episode is brought to you by Ground Control Mixed Martial Arts. Ground Control is the premier martial arts facility for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, MMA, or kickboxing in the Baltimore metro area. With 3 locations in Rosedale, Owings Mills, and Columbia, we're building up the best fighters or people that just want to look to do it for a hobby. Look, when I finished wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and MMA was just another way for me to have a competitive outlet. If you're one of those type people that wrestling might be finished, you're just looking for something else to do while you're still wrestling. Can't recommend jiu-jitsu, MMA, and kickboxing enough. Check it out. All 3 locations are on Facebook. You can find the Rosedale location at groundcontrolbaltimore.com, or you can find the Owings Mills location at groundcontrolom.com.
Awesome. So last week we sat down with our first guest, Keith Watson A.K.A Watty. He's been coaching for over 30 years, and he's now the chairman of the MSWA.
Yep. And now, as we're saying, how we're still learning, one of the things that we're learning is how to manage our time a little bit. This one went super long. In fact, Watty and Jason, myself, we sat down, hit roll and hit record on the camera, and all of a sudden it's 3 hours later, and we're now just wrapping up. What we did is we broke this down into 3 parts. We're going to get into part 1 here in a second. And then Watty also talks a lot about his coaching and also getting into the sport. His next one will be about when he took over John Carroll and some of the differences between coaching public school and private school. And we have a third one where we have content that we have sprinkled in about the MSWA here and there, and we combine them for almost an MSWA preview episode. I know Watty wants to sit down at a later date and talk over the MSWA more in depth and get give you guys a chance to ask some questions. But until then, we have a couple of episodes on tap, and I'm excited to get started.
Yeah, let's get to it.
Here's part 1 of the episode with Keith Watson. Let's get down to it. Let's start talking about what you've done over your career. Obviously, you're an administrator right now with the MSWA, but prior to that, almost 30 years of coaching experience that up in the Harford County area, and really created some really good programs up there. I want to go, back a little bit farther and how you got into the sport. But before that, when we were talking, I found out you grew up in a military family. Your dad was in the Coast Guard, and you said you moved over 20 times as a kid growing up?
24 times before I got out of high school.
Wow. Geez. Now, did that make it tough to compete in sports in general? Because, how do you bond with a team or a coach?
It made it impossible. I mean, I never did. And when you're a big white kid, and big and young is a bad combination, by the way. But when you're big, young, white, always the new kid, you're living in military situations. Sometimes you're in a real redneck neck of the woods, like in South Florida, or you're in some you're a target, especially for the spring-loaded chickens, like the guys that are physically mature, hair on their chest when they're 12 years old. The typical badass wrestler, high school wrestler. I'm the big dope getting picked on, and the whole reason I got involved with wrestling is because of getting my ass kicked on a regular basis by little guys. And then when I lived in South Florida, getting stomped beat like a rented mule on a school bus by the migrant workers' kids, the fruit pickers that came in for 4 or 5 months a year. It was miserable. And then here's superstar Billy Graham and Steve Strong on the Southwest Florida Pro Wrestling Channel or whatever it was back then. And oh my God, nobody messes with those guys. Now, as a 13-year-old kid, I didn't realize they were all on steroids and, it was all a big show. I kind of figured it was a show to some extent, but I thought, man, oh man, I bet if that was me, I'd beat the crap out of Fabio Gomez that has it in for me every day. As soon as I get on the bus, I get smacked or spit on. And I just looking at those guys like, that's going to be me. But
so your introduction was professional wrestling then. That's when you came in, did you think, I mean, a lot of people, when they start, they definitely equate it with, pro wrestling, WWF, all that kind of shit.
I had no awareness of amateur wrestling up until I was probably, I think, a freshman in high school.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now, were you a fan of pro wrestling?
I mean, I was a fan to the point of I wanted to be a big, strong son of a bitch like them. I was already big, but I didn't have, 20-inch arms. I wanted to be more like a bodybuilder than a pro wrestler, but I just wanted to be big so people would leave me alone.
I was a huge fan of WWF growing up. Like, back then it was the WWF. And like, I was thinking, I remember driving to my first practice ever when I signed up. Now I knew that there was a difference between the two, but between amateur wrestling and professional. But Earl Lauer, who was a longtime coach at River Hill, was my gym teacher. And I remember he talked to me about wrestling. He started the Howard County Rec program. And I started driving out thinking about what my finishing move was going to be. Like, I still remember thinking that. So like, it's, it's kind of embarrassing.
What was your finishing move going to be?
No joke. It was, so after about a week of wrestling, like, I think we learned like a cradle at some point. And I thought, well, I could do this into a perfect plex, so I was being like Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, and getting somebody in a cradle and then trying to throw him over and pinning myself. But yeah, it was, the pro wrestling influence. It's kind of embarrassing once you become like an amateur wrestler. And then once you get old like us, it's funny to talk about again. We can point out our deficiencies, but no, that's really cool. So you're in Florida and that's your first time you're exposed to the mat?
Because a gym class we had a shop teacher that was good buddies with the head gym teacher. And he was a 2-time Ohio State champion wrestler. And he taught shop. So he came into our gym class and he was going to teach us some wrestling. And that was my first exposure to it. But there was no junior wrestling down there. There was no junior league. There was no junior high school. There was no wrestling until you got to high school down there. So that was in 8th grade. So shortly thereafter, I moved up the street. I moved down to Clearwater, Florida. And this guy, Phil Chase, was the coolest guy I've ever seen. He looked like the Easy Rider, wore the bell-bottom jeans and the black leather vest with no shirt, had the big lamb chop sideburns, riding the chopper, out of Marine from Vietnam. The baddest guy on the planet. He was also the head wrestling coach. And I said something to him about, I understand you're a wrestling coach. I'd like to wrestle. And he grabbed me and took me into this little nasty room that was a old maintenance building where they kept their lawn cutting equipment. And they turned it into a wrestling room. And it was hot as nuts. We're in Florida. And we went to school all year round down there because of just so many people. So we were, I'm sure it was in late spring. And he was getting ready to go into the spring phase because the regular season was already over. And it was just hot as nuts. It was miserable. And I thought, man, I don't know if I can do this. I'll get all this self-doubt. Plus, I was big. I was like 6'2", 220 pounds. Couldn't do a push-up. And it wasn't setting in with me. It was like, this is not going to be something that I'm really into. As soon as I made that decision, my family moves to Maryland.
Oh, okay.
So I moved up here. We got wrestling. Bel Air was a good program. But I didn't know any wrestlers, and I didn't pursue it. Then my senior year, I'm playing football. I was a pretty good football player. The linebacker coach was also the wrestling coach. Well, one of my buddies had just moved into Bel Air from Parsippany Hills, New Jersey, Tony G.N. Giordano. He was so proud of his wrestling background and this, that, and the other thing. And, oh, you got to come out for wrestling. You be the heavyweight. I'll be the 185-pounder. It'll be great. Jack Vetti, our wrestling coach, decided he gets on board with it. So I come out for wrestling. Tony quits. So now I'm out. I got nobody to practice with except for a 130-pound coach. I had no 189, 185-pounder. And I don't know any wrestling. But I'm like, well, I'm not going to quit. You don't quit. You started, you got to finish it. And it just not a good experience. I mean, it was, I think I probably wound up about 500, but I didn't have anybody to work out with, and teaching of somebody to my size to do what the little guys do, there was a disconnect. And sitting out turning in, man, it took me forever to figure that out. I basically just flew by the seat of my pants. It was like a fight. It was like just clubbing and grabbing and stuff. And I never learned anything in high school except for maybe I did learn how to counter the big boy roll, the hook and roll.
Right.
And I learned, because I was headlock bait, I learned you get headlocked to your back, you put the high leg in, you tip back. I learned that, and that saved a dual meet for us in my very last high school match, where I tore my cartilage on a headlock. Guy headlocked me, popped my knee pop. Down on the mat, I'm losing 5-0, and I had just been shown, this guy Kenny Bryant showed me how to put that foot in, tip him back. Now it's 5-2, and we wound up going into. I wound up tying the match, which saved us for the dual meet.
Oh wow, awesome! So, now, like Bel Air, you said they had a good team then?
Yeah.
Okay. You still keep in touch with any teammates or coaches or anything like that?
Well, my head coach passed away here about a year and a half ago, but yeah, Tony Giangiordano, who was a teammate for a cup of coffee, he's now a county councilman. I see him on a fairly regular basis. But I've lived in Hartford County now since 1977, and my family moved here in like 1904. So
wow.
My name, not my name, but the last name is, people recognize the last name. And yeah, I see people all the time.
Yeah, it's crazy how, like, I guess you don't really, when you're all in there sweating and hating, the dread of practice and the grind that's going on, you don't think about, well, how the bonds form, like how long you're going to be connected to these people. I got married a few years back. Jason was actually my best man. And,
awesome best man speech, right?
It was subpar. I mean, it was great, but but no, like, I mean, all of my groomsmen I was either connected to through wrestling or fighting, and all of them had wrestled before. So it's weird the kind of bonds that you form. And I don't think if you would ask me in high school, I would have realized that, just how tight and how lifelong some of these bonds are that you create.
Yeah, I was football. Wrestling was somewhere down the line, but I was all about football. But when I finished with it, I knew I could have done better. If I had had better coaching, a little more time, somebody explained to me how this whole thing works. Like when I started coaching, I realized pretty early on that I was going to be better suited helping the big boys. And one of the first things I told them is, don't, be patient. The first one to make a mistake usually loses. And
right.
Give you time. So don't judge. They're not going to call you for stalling if there's no action in 15, 30 seconds. If you're big, they're going to let you go for a while.
Yeah. No. So, you end up studying at Towson University. So you go there to study political science, and you're playing football there at the time, but you're also wrestling with the club team some. Was that club team then? Is that the same that it is now?
I wrestled in I actually went and worked out with the team, which I say wasn't working out. I got my brains beat out by a guy named Slaughter, that was a state placer from Towson High School. He was a year ahead of me in high school. He was their heavyweight. But so I fiddled around there, but then they had an intramural program. And so I put together a team, right? And we were called the Kingpins, and we won it as a team. But I just happened to pick up a guy named McCleve, who was I think he was a state placer for Bowie back in the 70s. I had Tom Reese was there. Tom Reese took a long time to get through college, and he had a stint at Towson. So I think he might have been there part-time, and he was our heavyweight. I was the 190 because it's just the way things worked out. I just knew I wasn't a good wrestler. So they had weights were like 50, 60, 70, 80, and so on. And I was walking around about 205 or whatever. And I'm like, Tom Reese is going to be our heavyweight. I don't need to be in that spot. I'm going to be the 190. So I sucked all the way down to 190, and I won a match, lost a match, and that was the end of it. So that was the extent of it until about 1988.
Okay. So you were doing administrative stuff even. Is that something that I don't want to say, well, maybe you enjoy it, but is that something that you fill that role where you go is almost like an administrator? With the MSWA now, obviously we're super organized with a lot of the off-season stuff for, and in season, I'm sure, but we never coached together there. And then even back at your intramural days at Towson, did you find that skill, pretty early on in life?
I don't know there was really a skill. I just felt like I knew a bunch of these guys. And here, like I didn't know Tom Reese at all. And he just said, "Hey, you need a heavyweight?" I said, "Yeah, have you wrestled before?" He goes, "Yeah, I was a state champ in high school." I'm like, "Oh, you're the man." So
yeah.
I just did it because it just sort of happened. I mean, I don't know that I have any specific skill, but I will be the first one to organize a party because I know you want certain things to be at the party to have a good party. And I've just learned after time that somebody's got to do it, so it might as well be me, but I don't have to be the person.
Right. Okay.
I'm a good Indian.
No, I can tell you it's definitely a skill, because I can tell you firsthand that when you lack that skill, you need somebody to pick up the slack for you. But so we're at Towson. You end up. Did you graduate before going? Stepping back into the room in your first step in the doors in your coaching capacity?
Yeah, I got out of Towson in '85 and just sort of knocked around. And in the fall of '88, I was at a bar, and the football coach at Bel Air High School was in the bar, and he had on a jacket that said Bel Air Wrestling. And I just started talking to him, and I said, "You need anybody to shove your big guys around?" And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, I can't pay you. And I'm like, "That's okay. I don't need paid. I just want to come and roll around a little bit." Next thing you know, I'm showing up. I wasn't even legit. I mean, didn't have any county paperwork or anything. I'd come in every couple of days and just sort of roll around with the big guy, just give me somebody big to push against.
Okay. No, and it's funny that, I think sometimes there's a misconception about if you don't, and obviously you wrestled for a year and got a lot out of it and worked hard. So I'm not trying to, talk down about your experience as a competitor. But I think sometimes people think that in order to be a great coach, they need to have a great wrestling background. And definitely, I mean, Jason and I came up in Hammond High School where Bill Smith, who actually ended up helping start the Warhawks later on, he won 2 state championships. He never wrestled a day in his life. But he's, it was about connecting with his athletes, and that made him a successful coach. You have any input with that?
Well, I can tell you that, when I sort of inherited the program at Bel Air after a couple of years, when the guy that brought me in got fired as a football coach and he took his whole game and went to Aberdeen, I went right to Dick Slutsky because Dick Slutsky was, first off, he was a very scary dude. He's an ex-Marine, Greco guy, 2-time NCAA finalist from way back when. But nobody would ever talk to him. Everybody's afraid of him. And I'm like, you know what? I don't care. I need help. I just went to him, and he couldn't have been nicer. And one of the things he told me is 2 ways to become a good coach. You can either have come up through a program and you basically do what you learned along the way over those 5, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever, or you can go to school. And back then, we had very few resources. He had somebody had given me some Ken Chertow tapes when Ken Chertow was not Ken Chertow. Okay, there were a couple of tapes that he had done, look like he did them in his basement. That gave me just a little bit of something that I could grab onto as far as technique. But he basically said, do the best you can this year, and then if you still want to do this at the end of the year, this was a lot went on in between 88 and 90, I guess, 1 when Blizzard left. But Slutsky he says, I'll line you up to go work at some wrestling camps. And you can go in and you can learn from these guys. And he had me working with Ed Peary at Reg Wicks at the Naval Academy, with Carl Poff up at Lock Haven, with another guy named Tom Martucci, I believe it was, up at Bloomsburg, and with Neil Turner at Messiah.
Right. Yeah.
And
good company.
I just had to go to school. So I dumped myself into learning wrestling. And I don't know that I ever got really that good when it came to the technique side, but I knew because I bought right into the NWCA's program, which basically says, know what you don't know, find people to fill in around you, to fill in the gaps, the things you don't know. Well, I didn't know technique. So I got good wrestlers to come in and help me. Right?
Gotcha. Yeah, sure.
I organized, and I tried to always look at what motivates kids to what makes a kid want to wrestle. Well, some kids want to wrestle because they want to be in shape. Some want to wrestle because they want to show off. They want to show everybody what a badass they are or how they look good in a singlet. Well, you need to find something that kind of motivates them all to some extent and plug that into a program. And I think that was what I was good at, was making it fun and an enjoyable experience. And I'd say that the kids that wrestled for me from Bel Air to John Carroll would probably always say, we had a pretty good time in a lot of ways. And a lot of it had nothing to do with what happened on the mat. It was just having fun with other things. Now, my high school coach was an ultimate smartass, and I stole so much of that from him. He told me one time, he said I was the only person he knew that could fall into a barrel full of tits and come up sucking my thumb. that kind of mentality and smartass I've been using forever. My dad was a lot like that. Said those kind of little clips. And kids find that, that's funny. It's interesting. Even though it's your, you don't want your mom to hear it, but.
No, but now would you say that like immediately you found out a way to appeal to, different personalities like right out the gate, or is that something you learned over time?
No, I think that came pretty quickly when it came to like the marketing side of wrestling. Within a couple of years, I went out and I bought a mat lamp. Nobody had mat lamps back then. Back in say about 95, we put a mat lamp. Then I got smoke machines. I was WWFing it up all over the place. We had really good music, and then I also learned what not to do. Like I always thought the more that I had the kids involved in like picking the music, the more they would be, would be a bigger deal. And then when I got to John Carroll, it was like, no, I picked the music because what you want to hear is not what the crowd wants to hear. This music has to be for the crowd, not for you. Well, it gets me pumped up. You'll get pumped up. You just get yourself pumped up. I need the crowd to be dialed into what we're doing. And I remember Robert said to me one time, because we came out, the first time we did the big show at John Carroll, I had LaGrange by ZZ Top. After that, the first time it went really well, he says to me, "Hey, coach, can I pick out the music we have for next match?" I go, "Sure, pick out anything you want, as long as it starts out with how."
Well, those kids don't know good music anyway. You know what I mean? They're picking some weird stuff.
I feel like that's what every coach says is like, because the next generation coming up, it's like, what is this? Like, how are they practicing to this music? Or,
dude, but I'll tell you, man, we were all, AC/DC, like Queen, like Rocky soundtrack, which like
Rage Against the Machine, I think.
Well, yeah, I think, our generation was definitely like more into hip hop too coming up, but like you kind of like our coaches were the same deal. It was like, this is what we're playing mostly in practice, but then you just like, a Rocky soundtrack can't come on without me going right back to practice.
Right.
Start getting tired, start getting ready to drill.
One other point to that end, I was announcing football games at John Carroll for several years, and it was, that can be the most boring thing ever, and you got to figure out a way to make it a little more interesting. So I started incorporating music. Well, I would go in and play the music that I grew up to, because I'm looking at the people in the stands. They're all my age. So we're doing the Spinners, the Temptations, ZZ Top, George Thorogood. And the kids be like, "Man, I don't want to hear that." I say, "You know what? This isn't for you. This is for your parents." I look over and I got the parents. "Hey, yeah, man. Yeah, forget that rap stuff. This is what we want to hear." So it's not for the kids. It's for the people, the spectators. If you want to have an event, you want nobody in the bleachers, play what the competitors want. I want people in the bleachers. I want them to have a good time and feel like we had an excellent time at this event. And now we're talking about wrestling that 9 out of 10 people don't understand anyways, but they do know we had some pretty good music.
Right. Well, and there's, when you have packed stands, like the energy, you don't need music to get yourself pumped up. The energy provided from the crowd and from the atmosphere, that if that's not getting you pumped up, you got some problems on your hands, so you get the crowd pumped, and then the wrestlers can feed off of that.
Well, and then you're making a spectacle out of it. Like we're talking about, what did I do to kind of make it cool for the kids and enjoyable? You know, the music was important. We had the smoke machine, the mat lamp. I had a local guy that owned a pizza place. He gave me a bunch of his carry-out menus, and I had kids throwing, you know, at halfway through the matches, like at 152, we'd have a 3-minute break, and everybody took their paper menu and made a paper airplane out of it, and wrote their name on it, made a paper airplane, and then the 5 that were closest to the center of the mat, they all got a free pizza.
Just
awesome. Things like that.
That's a great idea. I'm trying to, I might steal that.
We had another.
Yeah, I think I'm stealing that.
Right after school, literally school got out at like 2:40. At 3 o'clock was the first mat. We sang the Star Spangled Banner, and I wanted kids to come. Well, every kid that came got a ticket. If you were there before the first match, you got a ticket. That ticket got you a Coke and a hot dog when the match was over. So now I've got 300, 400 kids to watch an after-school match under a mat lamp.
Was that at Bel Air or at John Carroll?
John Carroll.
I was gonna say I don't see that flying at a public school.
I can tell you right now, when John Carroll went to wrestle Southern Garrett, it definitely flew. When we walked in their school, they let school out early and everybody was mandatory. They didn't have a last period. They had to go to the gym.
At Northern Garrett, you said?
Southern Garrett.
Oh, Southern Garrett. Yeah, they kind of operated with their own rules out there in Garrett County.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. There's got snowmobiles all over the place and like 2 school buses.
Well, it's one of those things. If you don't ask permission, you know, you ask for forgiveness, you might be able to get away with it a time or two. Also, you know,
right.
Don't ask about doing it. So Bel Air, when you were, you know, when you found out about the coaching change, talk to me about that a little bit. So how did that go? Where you found out you were moving from a practice partner to, you know, a more official coaching role? So I was helping coach football, and it was a miserable experience. The first year that I helped, they were 0-10. It wasn't because of me. It was just because it was just a terrible experience. I was just helping linemen, and I was doing my job. But so after that, I'm like, no, I'm done with this. I'll just focus on wrestling. And so the head coach then, Gene Blizzard, he was the head football coach and wrestling coach. The next year, I'm not coaching football. He's the head coach. They go 0-10 again. He gets fired. It comes out in the local newspaper. You know, Blizzard has been removed because Bel Air was the big dog back then. You know, this county seat and all that. The local rag covered everything. And so I go to the athletic director. I said, hey, you know, I hear Blizzard's been fired. He's not going to coach wrestling. Who's going to be the head coach? And we had 2 ADs at that time. And the one that I went to, he said, well, we figured you would do it. So now I'm like, well, okay, yes, absolutely. We'll get it done. And I thought about it a little bit, and I'm like, man, what am I getting myself into? I can't teach the sport. And at Bel Air at the time, you only had 2 or 3 kids that had wrestling experience coming into the room every year. And if you even had 2 or 3, I think you're lucky. Maybe had 1. So if you had a couple kids that came in with experience, you died to go to heaven. But we had this program that needed teaching. We needed to teach the kids, and then we had to learn the drills and teach them how to drill and things like that. So Craig Reddish was, I knew his brother Brian from high school. He was on the wrestling team when I was there. And Craig was, I think he got 3rd at his senior year at Bel Air. He was on his way to becoming a teacher. He was sort of like some kind of an aide or something in the hallways. And I told the athletic director, basically, I need him to be with me. We'll figure this out together. We'll make it work. I'll make sure the paperwork is taken care of. Because at the end of the day, an athletic director, he can carry your programs 0-10, you know, just as long as your paperwork's done and nobody's complaining. Right, yeah.
Sometimes, obviously. But so Craig and I, we just basically took it over, and he was my, say, technique guy, and then I made sure everything else got taken care of. Then as he got older, then he became a teacher, a legitimate teacher, and he was head coach, and we still were kind of co-coaches for a lot of cases. I'm like the making sure that everything that needed to get done got done, and he was a connection with the kids and with the technique, and you know, he knew more wrestling than me. So that was we covered 2 bases that needed covering, and we did it together.
Right.
And
Now,
then,
talk to me about, or if you don't, I'm sorry to interrupt, but him being in the building, that had to have been an asset when you're trying to build a program up.
absolutely. There's no question. That's gigantic. When I went to John Carroll, first thing I said to the athletic director, I need you to find me a teacher. I don't care if he knows wrestling has a W in it. He has to be willing to be my eyes and ears during the day, or I'm not going to be able to do it, to do this. And
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, 100%. I mean, you know this, Mackin, when, you know, Toke left and it was just me and you at Hammond, having nobody in the building was awful.
It's difficult. Yeah.
It's very difficult. I mean, it depends on the school and like the administrative support, but yeah, it's terrible. So Bel Air, how long were you at Bel Air?
For 15 years.
Damn.
Okay. Yeah. It's and Reddish is still there, you know, it should probably, and still, you know, still running a quality program, still you know, Normal has likely to be there at state duels. I can't recall whether he was this year, but the previous year, you know, Bel Air's made it out there into the state duels a couple of times, putting out good wrestlers. And so it looks like it all starts from, you know, from the foundation when you guys started together. So still good to see Bel Air still doing good things out there. Now, like, there's a long history, obviously, of wrestlers and studs that have come out of the program. When I was looking back, one that stood out to me, and it was probably because I was a freshman in high school at this time, I remember watching the state finals, was Jeremiah Albright, the heavyweight that you guys had in 1998. He was a senior. Now, he was a returning state placer. He was actually lost a heartbreaker the year before in the semifinals, comes back. Was he the favorite to win the state championship going into his senior year?
I don't know that he was a favorite or not. I don't think we really thought in those terms. I mean, I didn't. I just knew we had work to do, and he was my project, so to speak. I knew I was friends with his dad, and I lifted with him off season. He was at my gym. We were practice partners. We went to the Mawa events together. So I just didn't think of it in those terms as far as who's a favorite. I just knew I knew I had this kid that had a lot of drive. And I basically told him, if you do what I tell you, I think you can be state champ. And what I told him, what I was going to tell him was, I would figure that out. You know, specifically what to do. I don't know. I'll figure it out. Just do what I tell you.
Right.
And we just worked our asses off. I mean, you were 275 as before he was a senior in high school.
And you're still practicing with kids at this point, 10 years into your coaching tenure.
Oh, he was abusing me. I mean, we were going hard. But my body was breaking down.
Yeah, make it tough to get out of bed the next day.
For 3 months in a row.
It's you know, he was definitely one that he stood out to me. I still remember his finals match. I think it was Jeff Blotchy from Arundel, who went on to be a state champion. Ended up smoking him in the finals. Just a tough kid. Do you have any stories with him?
Well, Blatchley, I just remembered looking at him. He was smaller. You know, Jeremiah was like 235, 240. Blatchley was probably like 200, 205, but just a physical specimen. But Jeremiah was a man on a mission. And when he got that look in his eyes, it was kind of like he had the eyes of a goat. You just tell he was just totally dialed in. And you know, I remember it being a really upside down match. It wasn't like he took him down and turned him over. He just sort of brutalized him, and he threw him around. I remember one time he went out of bounds, and the referee blew the whistle, and he just sort of flung him like a frisbee, just sort of threw him off the mat. And I was just, there's no way he's going to lose to this guy. The guy was just taking a whipping. But, you know, to his credit, he hung with it. He didn't give up. And it was, I think you told me it was 10-4 or something like that.
Yeah, 10-4 was the final for that one.
20-0 because he just got thrown around. It was man wrestling boy in a lot of cases.
Well, 10 points in a heavyweight match, if it's not a pin, putting 10 points on the board is still pretty impressive.
That's a lot of scoring.
No, it's cool. I actually was looking back at some of that, and he was talking about, in an article that Lem Satterfield wrote with the Sun, he was talking about him dropping, losing his last 3 matches of his junior year and using it as motivation. And I'm sure you had something to do with staying in his head and keeping him motivated. But one of the things that Lem wrote, or was that he said Albright immediately began working out last spring at the McDonough-based Northwest Wrestling Club, where he met North Carroll graduate and former University of Maryland wrestler Tom Reese, who you have a history with, as we talked about, from Towson. Reese placed 5th at the heavyweight division at the NCAA tournament. He also benefited from workouts with Brian Neal, a graduate from Howard High School, who was last year's 1A, 2A state runner-up. Talk to me, how important is off-season wrestling, and how much ground can one cover from the months of March until November?
You can't overemphasize off-season enough. I look at it like this and tell people this all the time, that if you have a new wrestler, he's only going to get so good during the season. You've got 4 major holidays. If you're in a high school, you've got academic issues. You got your final exams. You've got tests coming up. You got to make weight. You got to get your lungs right, get in shape, and you got to try to learn wrestling. And you have to go to tournaments and events. It's very difficult to learn the sport after year one, to learn a whole lot during the season. So you need to do it in the off season when you don't have to worry about grades. In most cases, you don't have to worry about getting your cardio right, or you can just focus on learning the sport of wrestling and developing the muscle memory. And when I started but Dick Slutsky and I and another fellow, we started Hartford Grapplers back in like 92 or there.
Oh, was it that long ago?
Yeah. And then I took it over at about 95. It became my baby, and I ran it up until 2002. I mean, we were huge. We had I think at one point we had like 140 kids in our club. We were having dual meets with Fish Catcher, Keith Norris's club at Calvert Hall. We would go over to see Tchaikovsky's club, Mad Mats or whatever, over Pikesville.
Matt Rats, is that what they were?
Yeah, maybe, I can't remember, something like
Matt
that.
Cats. Yeah. Solomon Carr, who I coach with now, he was there as well, and he's gonna slap me for not remembering. But
yeah, I remember Hartford Grapplers just like having a presence, like even online back, you know what I mean? This was in the late 90s. Like, you knew about Hartford Grapplers, like the presence was around, and us being in Howard County, it was a little far to get up there, but it was always like the club that you knew, like a lot of those good guys in the northern part of the state were at.
Well, we would come down to the MSWA Club Championship. Remember, they called it the East Coast Club Championship. I believe it was a River Hill.
Yeah.
And I would get so bent out of shape because, like, Brad Howell and these other guys would be scarfing these guys up as they walked in. They were unattached and say, "Put down that you're with Orange Crush," or whatever.
Yeah.
No.
That sounds like something Brad Howell would do.
Well, they definitely did. I got bent out of shape because I'm like, these guys, this is my club. These guys were in my club. That's the only place they practice.
Right.
And I think we got second like 3 years in a row, and it made me crazy that there wasn't some way to make sure that whatever club they registered for back in March is a club that they earn team points for at this point. They didn't think it was that important for the team score thing. I mean, I want my team to win. But
that seems like a common trend, though. I mean, at these national level, I mean, like, you know what I mean? It's like they had these all-star teams coming together, team whatever. And I don't know. Half the time I just think it's to, feed whatever coach's ego, about, oh, look at this, club team that we put together and run. But like you said, none of those kids are even practicing with them half the time.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's ego feeding and so on, and it's kind of like when I was at John Carroll. People are like, you could recruit. Yeah. You know what? You're right. I can recruit. I'm gonna make sure everybody knows you got at least 10 grand. You're willing to do triple the homework. You pull your pants all the way up, and you act like a respectable person during the course of the school day. Okay, that's what I got to recruit them to. Oh, and by the way, mom and dad, you're hauling them back and forth. That's a beautiful situation, right? I mean, I'm not giving them a Maserati. You're not telling them you don't have to do homework. They still got to pay. They're still held to a high academic standard. So and when we were at our height, I had one kid that was not from Hartford County. So as compared to some of the other schools, but it's the same with the club. Our club was all Hartford Tech, Bel Air, Falston. Maybe it was primarily from like 4 different high schools. But that was our club, and we were backyard guys, and we were we called the Hazard County Hitmen is what we called ourselves, quietly called ourselves, because we're the Dukes of Hazard. That's what we're a bunch of hillbillies up here. Season stuff was huge for a lot of things, developing wrestlers, but also for developing coaches, because there's a lot of coaches just like me. They came up through crummy programs, or they didn't have a long history. Well, now they can come into a room, and I've got Tom Reese and Matt Slutsky and some other people, and Dick Slutsky, that people that had experience, and other people that would roll through, because we've got Aberdeen Proving Grounds, a military installation. People that would roll through, soldiers that would be there for a short stint. Well, they got a place to come and work out, and they would help. And it was a great situation for the kids and for the coaches to improve.
Do you think sometimes now, like I'm thinking back towards like the Albright days, he was talking about the off-season training. I take it you were the driving and practice partner for a lot of those workouts that you guys would do. You're still involved going to tournaments and practices with the kids? We
were lifting weights. I wasn't really rolling around with him during the off season that much, because I would have to run a practice. You know, you got to run a practice with 60, 70 kids. I mean, I might dive in, but I had Tom Reese. You know,
but you're still involved.
Oh, yeah, I was blowing the whistle.
Yeah. So do you think sometimes, and I'm not trying to knock anybody or anything like that, do you think sometimes coaches can, coaches will tell their kids to wrestle in the off season, but then they're there from, November until March. And it's like, well, I told them. And I found me personally, it is more beneficial. If you're there, it gets them showing up. So if I'm going to expect the kid to be there, year round, putting in work, making themselves better, I feel like I can do the same thing. I feel like, sometimes coaches fall into the, you can't teach an old dog new tricks type mentality. And so they don't want to, they don't realize how much better they can become as coaches in the off season.
I think the coaches, a lot of coaches, are very good excuse makers. We've been running for 3 years. We ran 4 coaches clinics a year. I get 2 or 3 coaches to show up, and it's always the same coaches that are in the Hall of Fame already. It's not the coach of a program that's not any good or that's struggling to find success. Those guys can't.
Right.
They've got to watch the Ravens game. They've got tickets to the Skins game. They can't be bothered. It's out of, they're not going to bother with that yet. They'll complain that their kids don't go to camp, wrestle in the club, or do this, that, or the other thing. And I tell them right to their face, I'm like, you're the reason your program is not having success. And then I'm a jerk, or some other colorful adjective, because I told them the truth. But here's the good news. You're the reason your program isn't any good right now, but you can fix it. But it's going to take a little bit of doing. And all I do is look back to, if I had just done what I was used to when I first started, we never gotten anywhere. But I went to school. I went and I picked brains, and I stole information and stole this, that, and the other thing from the NWCA, from the coaches I met. If we had continuing education requirement for coaches in this state, as much as all these coaches would be like, oh, absolutely not, I'm not doing it, we would be a much better wrestling state. In Pennsylvania, if you're a high school head coach, you have to satisfy continuing education every year.
What are they, like, what kind of classes are they doing, or what? I mean, because a lot of the continuing stuff is like, I don't know, you watch this slideshow or whatever, you answer a quiz. Like, is it legit, like, stuff?
Okay, so the one that I'm familiar with in particular, I went to twice, and it's called the Pennsylvania Wrestling Coaches Convention. I don't know what they do. If they don't go to the convention, they might have other ways of fulfilling that requirement. But up in Grantsville, Pennsylvania, I think it was Grantsville, Pennsylvania, at a Holiday Inn, for starting at like lunchtime on a Friday through lunchtime on a Sunday, they had all these coaches come in, and they had college. You had the best high school coaches in the state of Pennsylvania, from Crowell to the guy, I can't think of his name, Steve, from Easton, from the guys from Northampton. I mean, all those.
Lisa's out of Hampton, yeah.
The best guys around. Jamie Kiriakis from out in Northern Allegheny. Then you had the college coaches, and there were clinics, and there were this and that and the other thing. It was a wrestling festival. I actually brought it back to Maryland, and I said, we need to be doing something like that. And it started, and then it stopped because it was financially upside down, because somebody got themselves, they were going to have Maryland Wrestling Day declared by the governor. And because the governor was going to be there, there had to be food and drink, and that cost a lot of money. And I told him, I said, the governor's going to sign this proclamation to keep moving, and we're going to waste.
Which governor was that? Hogan?
The one without the sideburns, Ehrlich.
Ehrlich. Okay.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with anything that Pennsylvania does in regards to wrestling that it isn't helping and working up there, because that's obviously a badass state.
I would go to these. I went to them twice, and very insightful. I mean, that's where I first met Kerry McCoy, and Kerry Colat, and it was an excellent environment. And I thought we need to be doing the same thing here. So again, continuing education. Most of these coaches, now when I was coaching at Bel Air, you didn't have to be certified with anything more than CPR. I guess you have to be certified in something basic, something that the federation puts out. But you don't really have to be that good of a coach in order to be a coach. You just have to be somebody willing to do it. And I feel like, the bar is pretty low, pretty much across the board. Certain schools, it's important that they have strong athletics, and that's, an athletic director driven or a principal driven situation. But a lot of times they just want to have somebody to, fulfill that job. That's possibly part of the reason that the private schools have a little bit have an upper hand in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, do you think that's just a symptom of it's hard to get coaches in general in the sport of wrestling?
It definitely is. But you know what else? It's hard to find referees. It's hard to get coaches because of the parents. The parents are overly involved, and they want to berate and second guess. I had one of the best teams I had second or third best team in the state. I had a 4 or 5 time national champ and a bunch of All-Americans on my team. But I got 5 dads sitting up in the bleachers. We called them the Disgruntled Dads Club. They sat up there and they picked apart everything I did because I was the reason their kid wasn't having the success that the other 4 or 5 were having.
Right. So do you think that's, or do you also if we're talking high school coaches, it cuts off a lot of people that are available to run a practice from 3 o'clock until 5:30 or whatever the case may be. Just, when people are finished with high school and college, then they, they're working until 5 o'clock. Do you think it's the parents that are driving away, or it's tough to find somebody that fits their schedule?
Well, it's a combination of both. But I mean, I figured out, I had my own business. There's a lot of people like me that are coaches. But if I was an athletic director, I would be going to schools that have a lot of phys ed majors or whatever. Like, I know that when I was at Bel Air, it seemed like they spent a lot of time at University of West Virginia looking for coaches of specific sports that could teach PE, health, or some other curriculum, because they wanted you to be a teacher, but also a coach. And then you get to pay the compensation thing. I was coach of the year. I got $2,100 when my last year at at Bel Air, I got paid $3,500, and we couldn't even get out of our own way once we got out of Harford County. So it's like, you're not doing it for the pay. No. But $2,100. I mean, it was costing me like $10,000 a year to be a coach at John Carroll. Because
yeah.
Into it, and I took away from my business, and I would just write a check to take care of the things that we needed that I didn't feel like chasing.
No, that's one of the things I say is the bigger my paycheck, the less that I'm spending on wrestling. And I think that's the case for a lot of coaches. Is and it's nice to get a little bit of coin in the pocket, but if you balance out the I'm still going to end up in the red at the end of the year after that paycheck comes in.
Yeah, I mean, not a single person besides, D1 college coaches is doing it for the money. You know what I mean? It's just like you hope to break even, I guess.
I think you might be. I think that in the general, what you just said is correct. But there are a lot of coaches that are coaches because it's extra money. They don't care whether they're good or not. They're just doing the job that they get an extra.
Yeah. What do they call them? Stipend snipers? I don't know. There's a term. I'm not in education.
Well, yeah. So I mean, in the public schools, so you get, I think a head coach gets around $4,000 or something like that per season. So it doesn't seem like a whole lot, but then if they're coaching, let's say soccer, wrestling, and baseball, and kind of, not super committed to any, it's an easy $12,000 a year that they're getting added to their paycheck. from it.
Think about this. You're young enough to remember. What would you have done for $250 a week 10, 15 years ago?
Oh, I might do it now.
It's $250
me and Mackin were doing studies at NIH for money. You remember that, Mackin, in college?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
That's part of the reason. Yeah, exactly.
But the people that get short shifted on all this whole thing are the junior league coaches, the junior league people who run those programs, because they get nothing. They get aggravation. They get all the aggravation they can eat. They get no help from the schools and so on for the most part. The only one that I know of that really seems to have a really good situation is Doug Yoakum over at Perry Hall, because he's got an athletic director that speaks the language, and I think that trusts Doug that he's going to do the right thing and he doesn't have to worry. But by and large, man, if you're a junior league coach, you are way down the pole in terms of influence and getting what you want. But you spend your own money to do everything. You get nothing back for it except for pats on the back and feeling a satisfaction for having done a good job. You don't even get support in a lot of cases from your high school coach. When I was at Bel Air and I was at John Carroll, I wasn't in those practices every day, but I made sure that they didn't need anything. They got plenty of mat cleaner. You guys, hey, look, I got a bunch of extra T-shirts. We'll give them out to your kids. Let's make sure we understand we're on the same page and we're working together.
Sure.
And I would dive in and run their practice for them once in a while. And I would I would invite the junior coach to come in and run the high school practice once in a while. Make sure that we maintain this connection and we're working together.
Well, you probably had to do that when you were at John Carroll, right? Because like you said, no one's districted to go to John Carroll. They choose to go there. So, did you ramp up your involvement in the junior league when you were in John Carroll? You'd be kind of stupid not to.
I definitely did, but not just because I had my nose way into the Falston Junior program. Because they were producing, I would say, the toughest kids at that point. So I was really supportive of them. But I also had to keep in mind we had Edgewood, Aberdeen, and Bel Air and North Hartford. I was dropping in all of them all the time. So there were a lot of times for this first couple of weeks before you started the competition, I'd leave the high school practice and I'd go up to North Hartford and just go in and talk to people. It's a recruiting thing, but it's also it's the sport. And I was also running the Hartford Grapplers. So I had a lot of balls in the air.
Yeah, it's no, and I remember the Grapplers continued after you said you stopped in the early 2000s. They were still going. Are they still active now?
They changed the name. They just changed to the Storm.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Same concept though. Yeah,
no, and they're still doing really good things up there. I mean, Hartford County, that's some tough wrestling up that way, especially now. You see what CM Wright's doing. Putting a lot of champs out there. Even Teddy Stinson at North Hartford, who was at Wright, I believe, previously. He was an eyelash away from a state championship this year.
Well, I will say this. John Thornton, the head coach of C. Milton, was with me for 6 or 8 years. He was the guy I wanted to take over for me when I retired, and I gave John Carroll a 5-year notice. Right before Ritter and Albany and those guys came to me, I told the athletic director, I'm going to give you my 5-year notice. Here's my reason why. In 4 years, my daughter graduates. I don't want to have her out of the house and me with no wrestling. So I'll go 1 more year and that'll be the end of it. So I was trying to get, not really formally grooming anybody, but I was really hoping that John was going to be the one. And basically he just said, it's too much work. And
okay.
I think what he's finding out now, it's different work. It's the same amount. It's just different.
Right.
Our athletic director at John Carroll basically said, don't ask me for money and don't embarrass me. When at C. Milton Wright, it's all right. We've got this Mickey Mouse little room that's got all these mirrors on the wall, on the wall that we can't touch. And it's, you can't do this and you can't do that. It's like, it's always something. Then you got the behavior stuff and then you got the pay to play. And it's like, look, it's all a hassle. It's just different.
Yeah.
How you handle it.
No, it's I mean, for sure. It's like you said, it's different types of work. We're always going to be working all the time to be successful. Just a different kind of work that you're going to be doing in different roles. I did want to talk at one point about the transition from public to private. Before that, I want to get, kind of take the time machine back for one more part of Jeremiah Albright and talk about, I know it was a big thing and a big match for you personally. It was the dual meet against Aberdeen in 1998. So, like, that doesn't seem like a big deal, I realized. Even, somebody like me that I was still young in my wrestling career then. But Dick Slutsky had built up a program that hadn't lost in almost 20 years in Hartford County. And now it's Bel Air and Aberdeen. This is 1 year after Slutsky retired. Jeremiah Albright steps out for you. It's 28-28. And Bel Air beats them for the first time. Like, what did that feel like for you?
Well, it was an awesome feeling. If it was not what I had expected, because Jeremiah kind of went out there in the overall big picture, he kind of laid an egg because he was trying too hard, but he wound up winning at the end. So it was like this emotional roller coaster we really shouldn't have had to go through. It should have just been going out to throw the guy down, turn him over, and pin him, and then we go to Pizza Hut. But it was like a big, man, I'm glad that's over. I'm glad Jeremiah dodged a bullet.
Oh no, yeah.
He
didn't make it easy on you. He was losing 6-4 with a minute left. Again, according to Lem's article there, it said that Albright answered the call coming from behind for a 9-6 decision that lifted Bel Air to a 31-28 victory. Aberdeen coach Dick Slutsky, who retired last year, with a dual meet record, and this stood out to me big time, of 289-42-1. 289 wins. This is pre dual meet tournament era. Like, that just seemed like an astronomical number to me. 289.
Yeah, Dick was, no question.
Wow. Yeah, he actually was quoted in it, and he said, "Our kid was leading till about a minute left. Albright took him down and tilted him. That's composure. That's sheer experience on the part of Albright." I like how, he's given credit to where credit's due. I don't know if I've ever seen a retired coach quoted in an article afterwards, but a couple of things stood out to me. One, how full circle it came, where, Slutsky was somebody that you came to help build up your program. And then eventually you're the one that's involved in knocking off the program that he built. And then the other thing that stood out to me was he quoted that he tilted him. A tilt in a heavyweight match. What are you showing the big boys?
Yeah, I can't.
Watty?
Yeah, exactly.
It's that the knee slide, beat on that elbow, beat on the near elbow, trap it from the other side, and put your knee against their knee and tilt them. It's that. I don't even know what they call it. I used to call it the stupid little tilt. It was easy.
Is that your most memorable dual meet, or have there just been so many of them?
No, I got two major ones. First was another one against Aberdeen when I was coaching at John Carroll. We were wrestling them. Dick had come back to help coach Aberdeen, and I'm at John Carroll, and I think Matt Miller might have been like a junior or something, and we wrestled them in a dual meet at the Iron Horse Duels. And I always had to say, well, I hated that the boom chakalaka boom, where the guys run out, they make a little tunnel of love, and a guy runs out on the mat. It just made me crazy. I hated it. When it's your turn to wrestle, if you're on the mat and I'm next, I'm going to be right there by that table. I want this to be bam, 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 bam. People out there immediately. There's no chance for them to be shuffling the lineup. I want to make them look bad, like they're stalling, because we're ready to go. And we had that rapid fire thing, and we beat them. We beat Aberdeen something like 56-6 or something. And Dick said to me, you got a hell of a program here. I have never felt so violated. Thanks. I feel bad that it went that way, but that's just how we're doing things now. It's just go, 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 go. And we would just teams a lot of credit.
We started ending that
from, right?
We started ending that clap too, didn't we, Mac? Do teams even do that? I think I see it a little
teams
bit.
Do it still. Yeah,
really?
No, Owens Mills does it now. So, like, I was actually going to ask when you were saying that, did that ever come back to bite you in the ass where, your kids are so well trained to go straight to the head table, but you maybe didn't want him you wanted to play matchup games.
Not that I can remember. I do remember this though. I had a kid run to the table in a matchup situation. I had him run to the table, but stop like 3 or 4 feet short. And I think it was against Curly. And Kessler sent his guy. He went to the table. I pulled my guy back and put another person. He goes, "You can't do that." I'm like, "He can report in."
Huh.
Ran to the table, stopped a few feet short, stood there. Your guy checked in. I changed.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
You got to check the name. You got to check the name.
Yeah. So the other match that stands out is the first time we beat Mount St. Joe. John Carroll was a B conference school for I'd say probably half the time I was there. And we were beating A conference teams as a B conference team, but we weren't beating McDonough and Curly and Mount St. Joe. But the first time we beat St. Joe was a very big deal. And I didn't think we were going to do it. And primarily, I knew we had a chance, but then I had a kid who missed school. So I had to put a backup kid in, and he had to just not get pinned. And he was wrestling, I think it was one of the Orem kids, the older one. And my kid just went out there and took his beating, didn't get pinned, didn't get tacked, and we won the match. And we also, at John Carroll, we had the choice in a lot of cases, wrestling in the main gym or wrestling downstairs in the lower gym. And I liked that lower gym because it was like a fight in the playground. Everybody's huddled around the mat. People are yelling and spit's popping out on the mat. And it's just, a fight in the playground. I mean, when I grew up, a fight in the playground, there was only 30, 40 people standing there, and you could get a kick. If you're fighting, you could get a kick from somebody watching. I just love that environment and the intensity and the sweat and everything else. And we put that's home field advantage. And we won the match. And it was just a great thing because John Carroll had never beaten Mount St. Joe in wrestling.
Right. Yeah. That's no, that's got to be memorable. I also like, and I'm just learning this now, but it seems like you're big on the atmosphere. Like you find ways to feed off of the atmosphere, whether that be the crowd being into the music or the setting is like an old fight pit. That's just pretty cool input.
Well, I figured out a long time ago, if you put girls in the stands, you'll get guys on the team. Most wrestlers are narcissists. They want people to watch them do their thing. And what high school boy doesn't want a bunch of girls watching him do his thing? And
yeah.
Be up there if it's an entertaining event. So, we just did what we needed to do. And I pulled some things. One time I watched the match. I got suspended because we were wrestling DeMatha with our second team. One year I had 2 varsity teams. I had my second team go to this Mickey Mouse tournament down in DC, and DeMatha showed up. And I thought DeMatha was going to bring their B team. Well, they brought in the big dogs. And they beat the crap out of us, and they acted like it was like they just, they're at a big party. I thought, you just put someone in jail and then you go about it like that's what you do. So I had a kid that had been suspended for grades, and he was coming back on Monday. He was going to be available on Monday to wrestle. But this was a Sunday event or Saturday event, and he showed up to school, and I'm like, listen, you want to come? You're not going to be able to wrestle, but just come anyways. Well, they're beating our butts, and they're acting like it's a big party. And I'm like, Tommy, put your stuff on, get out there, wrestle. So he goes out there. I come back to the school. I admitted the athletic director. I let an illegal guy wrestle. It didn't matter anyway, so they suspended me. So now the kids got it. The kids are rallying around the fact that coach got suspended for me. I'm sitting out in the parking lot. I couldn't even be at the match against Gilman. I'm out there on my cell phone, and my wife's at the match describing what's going on, and the kids are like, let's do it for Watty. It just, you figure out a way to turn a negative into a positive and rally the troops.
All right, guys, we'll take a break right there. Be sure to join us for part 2, where Watty goes into talking about some of the high-level wrestlers that he coached at John Carroll.
Yeah, thank you for joining Champions That Wrestle today. Till next time, we'll see you later.